So in my last countdown, I talked about my favorite boss fights in the Final Fantasy series, which, as many of you know, is my favorite video game franchise. Sadly, even though it's my favorite video game series, it's not perfect. And while it's got some fantastic boss fights, it's also got some pretty bad ones. Same rules apply as last time. Main series games only, and the 1 per game rule is not in play. There's literally nothing left to go over at this point, so on that note, let us commence. If you were to ask me for an example of how to open a game right, I'd use Final Fantasy VII as said example. I mean, you start up the game and what's the first thing you do? Bomb a freaking power plant! Now that's how you get your player's attention right from the get-go. Not only is the opening scenario really cool, but the whole opening sequence of the game is great. It provides you some context so you're not completely in the dark when it comes to the story, you get a chance to meet some of your main characters, and the game gives you plenty of time to learn its battle system. Sounds perfect, right? Well, it would be, but then the dungeon's boss, the Guard Scorpion, decides to make an appearance. Now at first, this battle doesn't seem too bad. It's got a reasonable amount of health, you have access to its elemental weakness, and it even uses a search scope before it attacks so you know which character it'll be targeting next. However, the big issue in this fight comes from when the Guard Scorpion lifts its tail up. When this happens for the first time, Cloud will give a warning to Barret to not attack it while this is happening, otherwise it'll counterattack. Except there was a bit of an issue from the translation team, because not only does the game use the wrong form of its, but it also tells you the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. So yeah, you can imagine how many people end up attacking the Guard Scorpion while its tail is up, followed by them getting wrecked by the tail laser. But there's more issues with this than just a mistranslation problem. For instance, the Guard Scorpion's tail is up for way too freaking long, so unless you need to heal your party members, you'll end up just playing the waiting game until the tail finally goes down. And this also leads to another problem, that being if you've already got a party member set to attack when the Guard Scorpion sets to put its tail up. Believe me, it sucks watching the camera angle change knowing that your character's about to attack. So yeah, it's unfortunate that such a great first level had to contain such a terrible first boss, but it also says a lot about the game's quality when you get its worst boss done and over with right at the start of the game. No other boss gets to this level for the rest of the game, which makes me really happy. Have I mentioned that I love Final Fantasy VII? Hey, what do you say we follow up one of the 2 big fan favorite Final Fantasy games with the other big fan favorite Final Fantasy game? While I don't put it on a pedestal like a lot of other Final Fantasy fans in the Countdown community do, there's still a lot I like about Final Fantasy VI. Heck, even when I consider the game's worst boss still has redeemable qualities, and that boss would be none other than the Phantom Train. Now at first glance, this boss fight seems pretty cool. I mean, it's a literal ghost train. Where do you go wrong with that? Well, for starters, have only one of its attacks actually be a threat to you, that being Diabolical Whistle, which allows it to cast a random status ailment on every single party member. The other 2 attacks do mediocre magic damage to your party, and this isn't even taking into account its greatest weakness. You see, in the Final Fantasy series, the items known as Phoenix Downs, which are usually used to revive KO'd party members, can also be used to do damage or sometimes insta-kill undead enemies. And with the Phantom Train being an undead boss and all, this applies here too. I'm not even joking, you can actually one-shot this boss with a freaking Phoenix Down. That would be like if you could instantly KO a ghost Pokemon by throwing a revive at it. Talk about wasted potential. That being said, as mentioned earlier, there are some redeemable qualities about this battle, hence why it's lower. For example, like I said, the concept is cool, and also when you get to this boss fight, you have Sabin in your party, and one of Sabin's abilities is the power to suplex enemies. You know what that means? You wanna know what I hate? Arbitrary time limits. You wanna know what I really hate? Arbitrary time limits attached to boss fights. You know what I'm talking about. Bosses like Meta Ridley in Brawl, or Aztec Falcon in Mega Man Zero, or, in the case of Final Fantasy, the Demon Wall from Final Fantasy IV. Now this boss fight doesn't have much when it comes to arsenal. In fact, outside of normal attacks, it only has one other move. But that's the thing. This one other move is an insta-kill attack to your entire party. Basically, in this battle, the Demon Wall will constantly move closer and closer to your party, and when it gets close enough, it will use an attack called Crush, which will be an instant game over for you. Because of this, the battle becomes a frantic race against time to kill this thing, and it's not even fun, it's just stressful. It can already be a pain for normal playthroughs, so imagine how many solo character runs have ended because of this boss. And if that wasn't bad enough, the Demon Wall is even worse in the 3D version. Thought 28,000 HP was more than enough? No? Good. Have fun dealing with 100,000 HP this time. Again, it's a very simplistic boss, but even with that in mind, it's frantic, it's stressful, and it's just not a fun battle to fight. It's a good thing later incarnations of the Demon Wall didn't implement the ability to insta-kill your party. Until Final Fantasy XII. Good work, Final Fantasy XII. So picture this. You're playing Final Fantasy V, and you're making your way through Waltz Tower to get the Water Crystal. You witness the crystal's destruction, and you manage to collect all but one of the shards before the tower sinks. Later on in the game, you're given an opportunity to go back to the sunken tower to find the last shard. And because of it being, well, underwater, you can only stay there for a short period of time before you drown. Yep, arbitrary time limits strike again! And once you find the shard, you're forced into a battle against its guardian, the famed Mimic Go-Go. Despite not even being present in the final dungeon of the game, the famed Mimic Go-Go is actually the most powerful boss in the entire game. This is because he'll copy everything you do, but on a grander scale. Defend, he'll defend harder. Heal, he'll heal even more health. Attack with anything, he'll counter will deal maximum damage, instantly killing whoever's hit by it. Yeah, this boss sounds insanely difficult, and because you're underwater, you're on a time limit. So how on earth do you beat him? Quite simple. Do nothing. Nope, I am not pulling your leg. This boss fight is actually a puzzle boss, as you're supposed to predict what the famed Mimic Go-Go does and copy him in order to win. So to do that, you'll need to just sit there and wait, so that famed Mimic Go-Go will sit there and wait, and then you'll end up doing what famed Mimic Go-Go's doing, thus winning the battle. Thanks, game. Well, this better be worth it in the long run. Thanks, game! So yeah, Final Fantasy III. A pretty forgettable game with a bizarre job class system, a boring cast of characters, an okay soundtrack, and a repetitive story. The latter especially since the plot branches off into several subplots way too much, each of which don't really do much for the overall story. One of these pointless subplots is when the party members are thrown into the middle of a civil war between two neighboring kingdoms, one of which is ruled by King Gorn. With the assistance of Gorn's son Alice, the party makes their way into the castle just as King Gorn goes to kill Alice. However, Gorn ends up killing himself, revealing that he was actually under a spell from his evil advisor, Gigameth, who had mind-controlled Gorn and got him to start the civil war and banish Alice in the first place. Upon realization of his plan's failure, he transforms into his true form in an attempt to kill the party, which brings us to our number 6 candidate, Garuda. This battle is honestly a mixed bag when it comes to difficulty, because depending on what job classes you have in your party, this can either be pathetically easy or frustratingly difficult. Let me explain the latter first. Garuda hits like a truck, most notably with his insanely powerful lightning spell, which could deal a crap ton of damage to your entire party in one go. It's even worse in the 3D version because in that battle, Garuda can attack twice in every turn. So you'd better pray that he doesn't use lightning for both of his attacks, because that's basically a guaranteed game over. However, while this boss hits hard and can easily kill your party, there is actually a huge exploit through the usage of the Dragoon class. If you just spam the Dragoon's unique ability Jump, Garuda will be dead in record time. But this leads to a problem. You gained access to the Dragoon class only recently, and because of the game's stupid concept of weakening your stats when you switch classes, you're gonna have to do plenty of grinding with Dragoons if you want to be able to take down Garuda with ease. So ultimately, this boss will either be really easy or really hard. But no matter whether you fight it with or without the Dragoons, it's gonna take up tons of time. And in the end, like the entirety of Final Fantasy III, it's really not worth it in the long run. So remember what I said about the original Final Fantasy in my previous list, about the game's difficulty? Yeah, I still stand by that statement. The original Final Fantasy is quite hard. And this is shown especially with 4 of the most prominent villains in the game, the 4 elemental fiends. Most notably the first of the fiends that you battle, the Lich. However, for the sake of this list, we're actually going to be talking about the second Lich battle near the end of the game. Now in the original battle, the Lich had a set attack pattern consisting of level 2 black magic, which at that point in the game is the most powerful magic you've been dealing with. However, in this rematch, the Lich replaces his level 2 black magic with level 8 black magic. If you're not sure how powerful that is, let me put it this way. The first spell he casts is Flare, which affects the entire party and is offensively the most powerful spell in the game. In other words, something a boss shouldn't have. And that's just the beginning. To follow up on Flare is the Stop spell, which inflicts paralysis to your entire party, and with a high success rate no less. After that, his next spell is Warp, which might as well be an insta-kill attack. And then after that, he'll use the spell Kill, which, as you can guess from the name of the spell, is a guaranteed instant kill. Okay, yes, this is a boss that's fought near the end of the game, but even with that in mind, this battle is beyond cheap. And if these attacks weren't bad enough, how about we scrap one of his weaknesses, making him even harder to kill? You know it's sad when the freaking super boss of the game is less annoying than the mandatory endgame boss fight. I think the best way to open up this segment is with something I said in my previous list. Some of the bosses got a little insane in the difficulty department. Yeah, that statement right there is pretty accurate. So here we have a boss that's notorious for its difficulty, the freaking Lamia Queen. Oh, where do I start with this awful battle? Well, let's just start by mentioning the famous Final Fantasy II exploit. Thing is, a lot of the tougher bosses in this game can actually be easily defeated through the usage of a little something called the Blood Sword. It's an insanely powerful weapon that's hard to find, but with it, you can plow down bosses, even the game's final boss. Problem is, you can't access the Blood Sword at this point in the game, so you're stuck with having to fight the boss properly. But honestly, even if you did have the Blood Sword, this fight would probably still be a pain. The big issue with this battle comes from the fact that the Lamia Queen's regular physical attack frequently puts the target to sleep, which, while it does wear off somewhat quickly, can be a real thorn in your side if she decides to hit someone like your healer. Not only that, but she can also use Charm 9 to confuse your party members, and even worse, she can also use Blink 16 on herself, which will make it pretty much impossible to hit her with physical attacks. So you'd better hope you didn't base your party around physical attacks, otherwise you're pretty much done for. You know what? I take back what I said earlier. Lamia Queen shouldn't go die in a fire. That's too generous. Instead, I think she should be subjected to Professor Radican's death trap.
Step, boom, twang, thunk, splat.
Yeah, that sounds a lot better. So remember how I said in my previous list that Trans Kuja would have made a perfect final boss for Final Fantasy IX? Well, I still stand by that opinion. I mean, there was plenty of tension and build up to that battle, and it paid off so well. Now, if Square Enix really didn't want to end off the game with that battle, they could have easily included another phase for the Kuja fight. That would have worked. But instead, they thought it would be a smarter idea to introduce a brand new character who had never even been mentioned for the rest of the game, and make him the final boss. Did no one at Square Enix realize this was honestly a really dumb idea? Like, think it through for a moment. On one hand, you've got a battle against your main villain. A battle that was built up for pretty much the whole game and was the only thing between the villain and the key to destruction of all life. On the other hand, you have whatever the heck Necron's supposed to be. I mean, seriously, what is Necron? The embodiment of death or something? I honestly don't know. Again, this character is literally shoehorned into the game at the last minute, bringing some confusing exposition with him about Kuja and his ambition to destroy all life, and how Necron believes that all life exists to seek death or some stupid crap like that, and how he plans on destroying the crystal and returning existence to a state of nothingness. Yes, we have another freaking villain who wants to return the world to the void! Weren't Cloud of Darkness and X-Death enough? Also, casually ripping off lines from Yoda, but that's just a minor detail. So yeah, as you can tell, the biggest problem in Necron is the fact that, in the long run, he doesn't need to exist. But even if that wasn't an issue, the battle against him still isn't even that good. Much like other final bosses in the series, he's got a lot of health, and has access to a plethora of both offensive and defensive magic attacks, meaning he can both inflict tons of damage to your party, as well as heal off his own. But the worst part about this battle is his signature move, Grand Cross. While it does look kinda cool to watch, the first time it happens, he spams this move a lot during this battle. And what does it do? Well, it not only does quite a bit of damage, but it also can inflict several status ailments, including death or petrify. It's even worse if your party member is inflicted with both zombie and death at the same time, because zombie holds over once the party member's dead, meaning you can't revive them unless you have a magic tag. And what happens after this battle concludes? Nothing. Necron just vanishes after his defeat as if he never existed. Talk about a giant space flea from nowhere. Honestly, the only real redeeming quality I can find in this entire battle is the boss theme, minus the disturbing moaning at the start of the song. Besides that, this boss literally has no reason to even be a thing. If there's anything I've learned from being in the Countdown community for so long, it's that there are several bosses in games that are under the general consensus of being considered cancerous in this community. Or, in layman's terms, there's a lot of bosses that a lot of Countdown makers really don't like. Some of the big ones include Jasper Pat Jr., Silver the Hedgehog, and number 2 on our list, the ever-so-infamous super boss, Yzmat. Now, many of you most likely know what's so bad about this boss, but regardless, I'm gonna go ahead and explain it, because that's kinda my job. So what's wrong with this battle? Well, we can find the first big problem right here. Yeah, it looks pretty big, doesn't it? Well, it is. Specifically, he has 50,112,254 HP. Keep in mind, the most damage you can do in a single hit is 9,999 HP. Oh, wait, my bad. That's only for the first half of the battle. Once Yzmat's at half health, the damage cap is lowered to 6,999 HP. So let's quickly do the math. 50,112,254 divided by 2 is 25,056,127. Now that we figured that out, let's look at the first half. 25,056,127 divided by 9,999 is 2,505.86, which will round up to 2,506. As for the second half, 25,056,127 divided by 6,999 is 3,579.96, which again will round up to 3,580. Finally, let's add up the two totals. 2,506 plus 3,580 equals 6,086.
Nobody said there'd be math!
Yep, this boss requires over 6,000 hits to kill him. That's kinda ridiculous. But hey, as if a boss taking around 2 to 4 hours to beat wasn't bad enough, let's talk about Yzmat's attacks. First off, someone at Square Enix thought it'd be smart to give this boss freaking insta-kill attacks. Second off, someone else at Square Enix thought it'd be smart to give this boss the ability to cast freaking buffs on him, including regen. But worst of all, the first guy also thought it'd be smart to give this boss the ability to reflect your party member's attacks once he's down to his 5th last health bar. And that's not limited to just offensive spells. He can reflect your defensive spells, and should he reflect renew, he'll return to full health, forcing you to do the entire battle from square one. So this begs the question, why the crap isn't this number 1? Well, because someone else at Square Enix saw how insanely long this boss was and decided to include a save crystal and shop close to the area. So you can save, restock, fully heal, and return to the fight with Yzmat's health remaining the same as when you left. So that makes it a little more tolerable than it could be. I mean, imagine if that wasn't included. That would be a living nightmare. You thought Necrom was a shoehorned final boss that really didn't need to exist? Well, he is, but surprisingly enough, there's an even worse case of a shoehorned final boss that really didn't need to exist in this series. A boss so infamous, so notorious, and so despised that he's not even considered the game's final boss by many players. I am, of course, talking about the final boss of Final Fantasy X, Yu Yevon. There is so much wrong with this boss fight that it's honestly unbelievable that human minds actually thought this was a good idea and let it get into the final game. So where do I start on why this boss fight has earned this reputation from fans? Well, let's start with the fact that right before this battle, your party is granted permanent auto-life. And to those who don't know what auto-life is, it's basically a spell that instantly revives the party member with it when they die. In other words, you cannot die in this battle. Literally, the only possible way to lose this fight is if you incapacitate your entire party with status ailments like petrification. And that's not even the worst part of it all. I mean, yeah, it's a big part of why this boss is atrocious, but there's more. For instance, Yu Yevon's main attack, Gravija, is not only not a threat to your party since you have auto life, but it actually does damage to him. Granted, he has 2 Yu Pagodas that constantly heal him, and he can also use Curaga, but that's still dumb. Actually, believe it or not, those 2 Yu Pagodas and the Curaga make things even worse, because with these things' help, there are so many ways you can exploit this battle. For instance, you can keep the Yu Pagodas incapacitated and let Yu Yevon kill himself with Gravija, but that's not even the worst way you can kill him. For some stupid reason, the programmers forgot to make him immune to the zombie status. So with the usage of a single zombie attack, you can actually let him and the Yu Pagodas kill him by healing. Or if you want to end it even quicker, just put the zombie status on him and then throw a Phoenix down on him. Insta-kill! But hey, that's not the only status ailment he's vulnerable to. He's also vulnerable to Doom. You know, that status ailment that'll place them on a timer and will kill them instantly when the timer reaches 0. So yeah, just throw a candle of life at Yu Yevon and the battle will end instantly in 3 turns. As I said earlier, this boss is notorious for how easy it is, to the point that the previous battle against Lord Braska's final Aeon is considered by many to be the game's true final boss. And I don't blame them. That battle had more build-up, it was more fun, you could actually lose, and the music was really freaking cool. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Even the music that plays during the Yu Yevon fight isn't that good. I mean, the opening part sounds great, but then it gets to the piano and just becomes a frantic mess. And it's funny because this is actually one of the only songs of the soundtrack that Nobuo Uematsu didn't compose. And believe me, it shows. To make a long story short, Yu Yevon is, without a doubt, the worst boss fight the Final Fantasy series has ever had. And it also holds the title for what I consider to be the worst final boss in any game. Maybe even worst boss fight in general. It's insultingly easy, it's beyond flawed, and it's a really disappointing way to finish off what I consider to be one of the strongest main series titles. Nicely done, Square Enix. Nicely done. I'm the One-Winged Angel, and take notes, game developers. When it comes to making final bosses, don't make it crap like this one. No one likes crappy bosses. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed this countdown. This was honestly a really fun list to make, as you could possibly tell, though it was a pain to actually fight these bosses. Anyways, if you liked what you saw, feel free to click those like and subscribe buttons, and if you want to watch other countdowns made by me, click on the annotation on screen. It will take you to a playlist of my other worthwhile countdowns. Or if you want to see what crazy antics I'm up to and occasionally update on my work, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm the One-Winged Angel, and I'll see you next time.